I would take critique from Hasan about being a war tourist more seriously if I had, went to Ukraine, spent a week there, danced around, and then left. I've spent 3 years of my life, and I'm going to spend the rest of this war trying to document the war and try to highlight Ukrainian stories. He refuses to talk to Ukrainian on his stream because he's scared to, because he knows that from their perspective, he's allied with the colonizer, and it's a dangerous position for a leftist to be challenged on publicly.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, how you been?
I'm okay. Just trying to cover all these updates, all this Trump negotiating. It's so masterful.
Yeah. So I asked like a few people around to like make some like questions like for you, if that's okay.
Okay. Sure.
And let me just get the questions.
Who are these people? Who are these people around?
There's some like chatters and stuff. Like in the little box server and like other servers and stuff. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Let me get the questions real quick.
Who's this? Who people are asking who you are?
Who I am? Oh, I'm like a clip channel for like Lunar Box. So like, yeah, I'm just a clip channel. Yeah, basically. Pretty crazy. This is my question. Like, what made you get into Ukraine? Like, what made you?
Like, what made me like first get interested in Ukraine?
Hmm.
Well, I was always interested in foreign policy since I was like in middle school. I was always interested in diplomacy and like stuff like that. I was taking IR classes when I was still in high school because I was able to get in some like specialty programs, stuff like that. And so when I started streaming, I focused on foreign policy pretty constantly. And eventually, as the war was coming around, most of the experts were saying that the Russians weren't going to invade, as they were starting to put blood bags on the border, which you only really do if you're gonna, people are gonna bleed, which it's only gonna happen if you're gonna invade. And as I was saying, it's 50-50 chance from everything I'm listening to and from everything I'm seeing. I still saw so much confidence from experts and non-experts, people like bottom shelf commentators, saying that it was impossible. And then they invaded. And then those experts switched from it was impossible to it'll be over very quickly. And now it's been 3 years. And so for me to have such back-to-back failure when it comes to like public consciousness about what's going on over there, about whether the Ukrainians were actually even going to pick up guns and fight, whether like the idea of taking a city of 3.5 million people with the troops that Russia sent, you can only truly believe that's going to happen if you believe people are just going to kind of accept it and they're not going to pick up guns, they're not going to resist, they're not going to fight. The Ukrainian standing army isn't going to be enough to hold as they get ready. You would basically have to believe that the Ukrainians would be willing to roll over. So the fact that, a lot of this post-fact like makes sense that they certainly just didn't have enough troops to take the whole country. If Russia maybe sent more troops at the start, maybe they would have. But for me, I wanted to figure out why they got it so wrong, and I felt like the only way to do it was to go to Ukraine and like listen to people. And then that's paired with like a belief, and I really do think that journalism is the first draft of history, and you want that first draft to be good so people can take lessons from what happens, and so people can know what happened there. And there's a lot of lies about it, so I want people to know. And
Dylan, who is this person?
Who is this person?
How is he loner box?
This is Hasan Clip Channel. But
no, it's a little bus. It's a little
Hasan Clip Channel. But lastly, I also do believe in Ukraine's cause. I do think that the democratization of Ukrainian society is good. I think that the Euromaidan's movement, not only for European integration, but also anti-corruption efforts, I think that was a good spirit. I think that their want for civil society, their own people, their own culture, their own nation, which Putin doesn't even think has a right to exist, I think this is a valid struggle. And I think that the Ukrainians have been quite conciliatory up until 2022. And at a certain point, if you just keep conceding, and just giving into the Russians, you're really encouraging them to curb stomp the Ukrainians, if anything.
How do you like balance like your work life or like your journalistic on Ukraine and like your streamer social life kind of?
I don't.
If that makes sense. Oh, you don't? Yeesh. Have you met anybody like that had their loved ones taken by the Russian military, like kids stolen. I heard about that.
I know quite a fair bit about it. You know, there's people working to, you know, save the kids. There's a lot of a lot of it's pretty secretive, because if you find out, if the government finds out about it, the Russians find out about it, they stop these programs. But there are still thousands upon thousands of thousands, like probably well over like 12,000 Ukrainian children that were stolen from orphanages or across Ukraine, where the Russians like told parents, like, give them up, you'll be able to collect them at a later date, and it just never happened. And these kids ended up at these I guess you can call them indoctrination centers, where they sing Russian songs, they put on Russian military uniforms, they're made to do dances, do military courses, and the war's been going on for so long that in some instances, like, they're looking at mobilizing these kids into the armed forces. So you kidnap Ukrainian children from orphanages, send them to Russian indoctrination school, then when you turn 18, you give them a gun, and you send them to Ukraine. And this is horrific. This is illegal under international law. But this has been going on in Ukraine already for a while. At the start of the war, there was a lot of making fun of Russia due to them having like Mosin Nagats and like shitty weapons, because they had to mobilize like every resource they had on hand. And so we saw a lot of Russian soldiers with like that, those units that had those were mostly Ukrainians. They were mostly Ukrainians that were forced into service in occupied territory, that were told, you either pick up a gun or you're going to jail, and your kids are going to be screwed because they're not going to have a dad, and they're kind of forced into it. And that doesn't make the decision right. You know, they could always flee their home and leave everything behind. But when somebody's put in a position like that, that's a little different than I, like, willingly signed up because I was so excited about shooting my neighbor, you know? So they've been engaged in this type of behavior of, like, forceful recruitment for a while. It's just, but in, you know, the indoctrination of Ukrainian youth for a while in occupied territory, it's just that this kidnapping was particularly horrific and well documented.
It's pretty crazy that like this war, like in this case, like you see like every era, like that, like weapons and like vehicles are used. Like you see like World War II all the way to like the Cold War era. It's pretty crazy, you know.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
It's pretty shocking that like Russia, like the most powerful military in the world, supposedly, right? Got cooked. They got cooked.
I mean, I've seen weapons from like before World War II in use on the front. I've seen weapons shooting down drones manufactured months ago, being shot down by guns manufactured when Stalin was still in power. You know, it's there's a lot of stuff like that. It's because both the Ukrainians have to pull on every resource they have, obviously, because they're a much smaller nation with smaller population. And much of the Soviet reserves they were forced to give to the Russians by the American. Okay, there's I have a lot of angst. But the point is that they don't. They have to pull on whatever they can get, and many of their soldiers and old veterans that are being called out have experience on, you know, Soviet equipment. But the Russians, I mean, to put it bluntly, they just burned through everything. They did so many tank assaults and lost so many tanks and so many BMPs and so much stuff that I'm seeing BMP-1s made when Khrushchev was still like raving about corn to the Soviet population, with the gun taken out, replaced with a machine gun with no top, like it's a convertible. Like, and these are engaged in frontline assaults. Now, a modern military with no problems does not do that. You don't see motorcycle assault squads getting their feet blown off by butterfly mines near the front line, unless you have a shortage of armored vehicles. And that's why we're seeing older and older Soviet gear trenched out to the front. Now, I'm not saying they're going to run out of gear in the next year, but I am saying that by the end of 2025, if fighting continues as it is, the equipment's only going to get older and older, of less quality, and there is going to be a bottom of the barrel. The idea of blowing through the entirety of the Soviet armor stockpile was kind of preposterous at the start of this war, but now it's not impossible.
Let's see. Oh, how do you combat like Russia, like because like my dad, he's on the like the pro-Trump, you know, like the Russian talking points. I'm like, that's kind of crazy. And then like 2 is, what do you say to people that call you like a war tourist or like someone like Hasan, like spouting like some like pro-Russian talking points?
You can send your dad with me. I'm heading back next month. Just make sure he packs well. I can show him some stuff. I mean, like, the main thing I think is you just show Ukrainians talking about their country. When you see somebody passionately describing why they want to return home, or how their church was shut down in Mariupol, or how they're not allowed to criticize the government, or how they're afraid of the soldiers and or the massacres or the mass graves, or how, you know, when you listen to people talk about their own communities, their own homes, and then people are forced to imagine themselves in their shoes, I think it really helps. Because this bullshit about, you know, the Russians coming to save Ukraine, or, you know, oh, the Ukrainians XYZ, so we need to cut off the aid for the Ukrainians, or some way like it's a they're the worst of the people who think it's a benevolent act to pull the rug from out under the Ukrainians, as if you're waking them up from some sort of slumber and not just decreasing their leverage and making it so more cities are going to be within artillery range. So I think just the best stuff is to humanize. I think Zelensky's interview with Lex Friedman sees it as semi-unsuccessful due to the fact he didn't find peace, but I find it as very successful from Zelensky's goal of trying to, you know, not only describe the national cause of Ukraine, which he is very good at doing, it's one of his best skills as, you know, somebody who's very experienced with the media, but also when it came to humanizing the Ukrainian struggle. So I would say that focus not on English-speaking commentators, listen to Ukrainians, or show them Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians can speak English. There's plenty of English-speaking Ukrainians who have described their own story. And I hope that authenticity will shine through the plastic bullshit proposed by many people in the alt media sphere and coming from the White House at the moment. As for the other question, what was the other question again?
How do you what do you say to people that call you like a war tourist? Like, someone like Hasan, when you posted the like Ukrainian Anna and like the other Ukrainians talking about reacting to the video of Hasan like spouting like pro-Russian like stuff, basically.
Hasan's a war tourist.
Mm.
Hasan goes to wars without researching them, without doing any research on what weapons being fired, or who, like, what side's doing what, or the history of the peoples, and he starts making declarations. He sees a weapon fall on a city, and he starts pretending he's a weapons munition expert. He sees a bridge get blown up, and he says he's a terrorist attack because his brain has been rotted by the war on terror, just like tons of other people in the American media space. He sees some rumors about a Boris Johnson deal, immediately buys into it, and says that Boris Johnson, we could have had peace at the start of the war if just Boris Johnson had told the Ukrainians that Russia is big and strong, and they couldn't, it had just told them to take the, you know, the peace deal. The peace deal, mind you, where the Russians would have destroyed Ukraine's military. They wouldn't have been allowed to have an army to defend themselves. When a burglar breaks into your home, you do not encourage the homeowner to throw their shotgun out the window. It's stupid. And so I would take critique from Hasan about being a war tourist more seriously if I had, you know, went to Ukraine, spent a week there, danced around, and then left. I've spent 3 years of my life, and I'm going to spend the rest of this war trying to document the war and try to highlight Ukrainian stories. He refuses to talk to Ukrainian on his stream because he's scared to, because he knows that from their perspective, he's allied with the colonizer, and it's a dangerous position for a leftist to be challenged on publicly. And that's why I never responded to the video and just responded with insults. So I think he acts like a war tourist much more than I ever have. But, you know, if he disagrees with me, sure, can talk to me at any point. I'm freely available. DylanBurnsTV@gmail.com.
Let's say. What can change like Donald Trump's mind on Ukraine? Like, how can he like be more, what's it called? What's the word? More harsh towards Russia, like forcing sanctions, you know, forcing the idea of like sending U.S. troops or NATO troops to Ukraine if they invade a second time. Like, what would change Donald Trump, you think?
I think the only way you can change Trump is by, number one, I hate Duda's proposals. I hate some of these Europeans I'm speaking to who don't know Trump by nature. And so their first thought is as if they're engaging with the mafia and they're a scared shop owner, and it's to concede, and just give him what he wants. Brown knows him, and then maybe if you play enough golf with him and feed the fish with him, then maybe he'll, throw you a bone. And I do think that to some extent you do need to do some back padding, saying like, look, you're a smart businessman, you know that X, Y, and Z. But this worship Trump strategy is not going to work. Trump's going to read it as weakness. He's going to smell blood in the water. He's going to take him for everything that he can, Zelensky. He writes in his book, Art of the Deal, that his strategy for negotiation is, well, his ghostwriter wrote for him in the Art of the Deal, that his strategy is to, maximize, to go for the most maximum concession possible. And so that's what he's doing with the mineral deal. That's what he's doing with all these deals. And if Zelensky just concedes to it, not only is it going to be giving away Ukraine's ability to rebuild by giving away the natural wealth that is a mechanism to build back its cities, which, I mean, if Trump cares so much about being repaid, he's not going to be involved in that rebuilding program.
Yeah, we're not.
While talking about building cities from scratch in Gaza, and moving the people off that land. So I think he has to give him a bloody nose. I know this is maybe an unconventional, at least it seems unconventional, but I think Zelensky needs to say, look, I'm not taking this deal. This is the deal that I would accept because it better integrates our countries and allows us to continue aid, and it allows you to look better. It allows us to look better. It allows. I think he has to stand up, and if it doesn't work, it wasn't going to work to begin with. I don't think that rolling over is the strategy. My point to him would be, you need to make him respect your strength. When he says that Ukraine has no cards, you have to make him understand that you do. And that is both in a military sense when it comes to its targeting of oil infrastructure, when it comes to the butchering of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, when it comes to the fact that it takes a lot more damage to your army to attack than it does to defend, or any other number, of advantages or like cards that Ukraine has at its disposal. The fact that I do believe that their morale will stand the time stronger than Russian morale, just due to what they're fighting for versus what the Russian soldiers, which are now like in their 50s, like these recent conscripts. I mean, not recent conscripts, recent contract soldiers. Like the average age is 50 for the end of 2024. Like they're here for money. Are they gonna go on a suicidal death march to attack the enemy, knowing that it'll help the position, but they won't be able to see the money that they're fighting for? The Ukrainians don't get paid like that. They don't. I've talked to them about their pay complaints quite frequently. So it's I think there is cards that Ukraine holds, and they have to make them not only visible militarily but also politically. Biden's first failure in office with Afghanistan, he never truly recovered from it. I think this would make Afghanistan, while it would look bad, Afghanistan still, I think it would actually look comparatively worse if the worst was to come to pass, because Trump didn't know what to do diplomatically.
Mm-hmm. Isn't the United States suspending U.S. Aid to Ukraine, like military-wise?
As far as I know, there's still like shipments from what has been previously approved that is being sent over, but there's still $3.8 billion in presidential drawdown authority that could be sent over. That has been congressionally approved that he refuses to touch. And now we're hearing from Reuters that they're talking about possibly cutting off Starlink communication support for the Ukrainian armed forces in order to try to get them to the table to accept the buying out of half of Ukraine's natural wealth, its ports, its critical infrastructure, etc., to be owned by the United States. This is a deal that the Ukrainians are even willing to play ball in negotiating something. They just aren't willing to sell out half of all of their natural wealth and all that stuff. But they're willing to cut out the communication support. I did a documentary about this, not this exact scenario, but the fear of this Starlink support being cut out, called Ukraine is Risking It All, on Elon Musk. People can go check that out if they want. But essentially, all of Ukraine's frontline units are reliant on Starlink due to its ease of access to the internet. All you need to do is just point at the sky, and you have access to communication software. You have access to map updates. You have access to command. You have access to drone footage. You have access to the internet. You can contact your family, but like at just about any time, as long as you're not on an active combat mission, which is, really a good boost for morale for Ukrainian soldiers. If this was cut out, especially if they pulled the plug randomly, that could be a disaster for the Ukrainian armed forces. And it could get a lot of people killed, especially if the Russians try to take advantage of the moment, which I think undoubtedly they would be stupid not to.
How would you feel if there's like no other way and Zelensky generally thought this was good for his people, and like he conceded and like signed away the annexed territory of the Luhansk.
All of the annexed territory.
And that's yeah.
He would probably stay in office for a few hours. I mean, I don't know what I think, but this is the thing. Ukrainians are willing to negotiate, right? They're even willing to negotiate away land, which is asking a lot to say, like, look, I'm willing to never go home. I'm willing to sign that land away for peace. But the demands that Russia's making and what you're outlining here, like everything they've annexed, that would mean that the city that they're doing the human safari in Kherson, and I filmed a documentary on that. It's going to be releasing in about a month. Other people have documented it. They would control it. So where they're openly hunting the civilians, we're just going to give those civilians over to them? Or are we going to evacuate all those people out of their homes? They fought for that city. They pushed them over the Dnieper River. To give them a bridgehead over the river is not only evil in the giving up of that city where they brutalized the population so directly into the hands of the brutalizers, but it is also giving them a bridgehead over the river, getting rid of one of Ukraine's best natural defenses, which is help protect Kherson from reconquest. So if they were to give that up, it would be to Zaporizhia. The Russians have never even gotten close to taking the city of Zaporizhia. They've announced its annexation. That would be included. Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka, Sloviansk. These are not even territories that the Russians control. None of these things that I've said so far are things the Russians control. These are all places, hundreds of thousands, probably all together. You're probably talking about like 1 million people at least. And they're going to tell them all to leave their homes, leave their belongings, or hand them over to the people that have brutalized them so. The Ukrainian people just won't accept it. They might be able to accept giving up some territory, but to give up everything that Russia's annexed would spell the political death of Zelensky. And I mean, I have a bad feeling it would also embolden a lot of bad actors in Ukraine. So I don't think a compromise is one thing. Ukrainians are willing to accept a compromise. 1% of the Ukrainian population, due to a recent poll, literally a single percentage point, was willing to concede to all of Russia's demands. And that includes stuff like that annexation plan.
Do you think like other European countries could like have the same support but without the United States, like keep up the funding?
Not the same. This is the problem. I could create for you a spider web of because on election night, if you go back and watch that stream, I was silent like a church mouse once I saw the writing on the wall. Both because I was letting other people speak, but also because I was running through a million scenarios trying to figure out like, how do we make this work now? Right? This is the reality. How do we make this work? And I remember thinking, okay, South Korean 155 millimeter production, if that was able to replace American ammunition production, then that could be able to fill the gap. And if the Europeans were able to spend this much and that much and this much, but the South Koreans are not. They're in a constitutional crisis, and unless Trump makes them, they're not going to do it. And the opposition doesn't want to do it anyway. And they're the ones that are not the ones that tried to kind of coup the government. So difficult position when it comes to the idea of South Korea replacing ammunition support. Europe can expand its ammunition production, but it cannot expand it fast enough to replace the United States. They have provided the majority of aid to Ukraine, so Ukraine would be retaining the majority of its aid. I'm sure they would increase it to some extent, but there are also some European powers that are not on board with continuing to support Ukraine, like Hungary and Slovakia. And so the one thing that I've narrowed down, which I think is kind of like the nuclear option that they could go to, would be the seizing of all of Russia's assets in Europe. There's about $300 billion worth of Russian assets, largely in Belgium, Brussels, held up with, I forget the exact name of the financial institutions, but they're in Brussels. And there's been discussion about seizing these assets, and it's always been no, because they're fearful of, well, eventually one day they want to be able to normalize again. But if the Americans are not able to plug the gap and the Europeans don't have the fiscal capacity to plug the gap, then they got to plug the gap somehow. And I think making the Russians pay for it is probably the only form of reparations Ukraine's ever going to get in the first place. So I would advocate for not only increasing aid from European capitals, but also making sure that as much Russian assets that can be seized are seized as possible, and immediately directed towards the war effort. As much as people could talk about holding it for the future for rebuilding, you gotta survive to have the ability to rebuild.
How would, so can I say, would be a good way. Have you interviewed any of our like Ukrainian officials, or like in that?
Not like government
area?
officials, no. I don't care about that. There's plenty of people doing that, right? It's like, why do I need to be in the White House briefing room? There's 20 other people in the White House briefing room, right? I don't need to be in the White House briefing room. I don't need to be in the Pentagon room. I don't need to be talking to the officials. The highest ranking official that I've talked to publicly is a mayor from a border town, because I wanted to do a story on how the border towns are getting shelled. I prefer to be where freedom is being fought for. I don't want to be prancing around in Kiev in suits and ties.
Oh, it's like the local, like you want to like get the point of view of like the locals and like what's their perspective like on the war.
Oh, you mean have I talked to American officials, not Ukrainian officials?
Both.
Well,
I'll say both.
I haven't talked to American officials about it either. I mean, like, nothing, no public interviews or anything like that. No, everything. I mean, look, I prefer, like, do you want me to give their perspective, or are you asking me like my opinion on them? What are you getting at?
I'll say both. Like, what's their opinion, and like what can like change the American official like being like pro-Russian, you think? Like what, like, you mean?
I mean, how do you change the American official being pro-Russia? I mean, a lot of this is the information space. And like, these people should be smart enough. They should be smart enough to be able to like get their own information and be well informed. But for a lot of them, they're not. They're not. They take the easy route. They just scroll on social media and they call it news. They call it their information feed or whatever. They call it a day. And if they read it there and it confirms like a bias or a suspicion that they had before, then it's very easy to believe whether or not it's true. And so what you need to do is defeat confirmation bias and defeat laziness, which is quite a mighty task. But the best thing that people can do is try to increase the sources of good information, which is why I'm trying to increase these rough drafts of history, or at least increase these sources of them.
Oh, what was your thoughts when the Free Syrian Army took over Syria and like kicked out the Western forces?
I mean, I thought it was inevitable. I mean, it's not inevitable as in that was going to happen like that, but I knew Assad had to go. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. There was never going to be peace in Syria with Assad. Assad never was willing to compromise. He never showed any ability to compromise. He's released terrorists from prisons, not only to fight us in Iraq, but he released terrorists in prisons in order to try to like undermine the movement, the revolution against him. He was never willing to compromise with the FSA. He was never willing to make significant enough compromises with the SDF, and he wasn't able to administer the state. The state was getting more corrupt and more corrupt every year. You could see it that Idlib, where the rebels were, had lights on and more hourly like electricity than the government capital. The rebels were getting a higher standard of living through time than the government capital of Damascus, backed up by both the Iranians and the Russians. And I mean, what was their new economic system? It was a cartel state, the Captagon trade, being run by Assad's brother. This was bound to fail. It was like a cartel running a country, and you could see that it was bound to fail. It was just a question of how it would fail, whether it would fail into whether it be ISIS, whether it be Islamists, whether it be some sort of, other group, whatever, what else it would be. I'm just happy we didn't get the worst case scenario and that Assad's gone and the butchering has stopped. Now it's a question about the future and making sure that there's a Syria where everyone is welcome. But like I've already seen that like Jews have been able, like there's a problems with the new government, whether it has to do with how certain things they want to approach when it comes to education, how certain fighters have treated definitely LGBT minorities. I've seen some pretty horrific videos coming out of that. But also like I see Jews going back to Syria for the first time in like 30, 40 years because the new government is more accepting of minorities than Assad was as the defender of minorities in some ways. And these are supposed to be the like bigoted Islamists. And look, they're still Islamists, but we got to remember like the competition here, right? Like as much as I don't like, I don't like say I'm not a fan of Jeb Bush. If he became president, I'd be very disgusted by Jeb Bush. I don't like George Bush either. But like if I had him or Stalin, if it was him or like so they had to get rid of Assad for Syria to ever move on. And so the path the point that chapter in Syrian history is closed means that there's an ability to write a new chapter. And a blank page is better than decades of butchering.
So I got a question from this person in the Discord. He said, ask him what he thinks of the Assyrian. Is it the Assyrian and the Kurdish nationalist movement? Syrian
and Kurdish nationalist movement. I don't. Does he mean the SNA and the SDF's fighting, or because that's where the fight. So I recently interviewed a friend of mine, Patrick Hillsman. He's a good friend of mine. I did reporting with him on the front in Syria, not in Syria, in Ukraine. But he just got back from the front line in Syria, northeastern Syria, with the SDF. That's the Kurds, largely Kurdish-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces that control the northeast of the country, that took control after the government of Assad fled and ISIS was taking over. So when the government ran away, when ISIS came, they were the ones that fought off ISIS and we worked with. Well, they're being attacked by the Turks in an aerial campaign, and they're using mercenaries and Islamists, and in many instances just straight up jihadists in the Syrian National Army is what they call it, which is different than the Free Syrian Army. And it's attacking into northeastern Syria because they don't like the amount of the SDF due to its ties to the PKK, which Turkey sees as a terrorist organization. In fact, they don't even see a distinction between the PKK and the Syrian Democratic Forces. And right now, I believe that the only solution is for Syria to unite against the Turkish incursion, and for then the SDF and the government in Damascus to make a deal for them to be reintegrated into Syria. I think it's the only option. I am horrified by the Turkish bombing campaign, and I do see some positive signs about the negotiation that indicates that the SDF knows that they have to be reintegrated into Syria, and that's good. I think that decreases the bloodshed, and the government of Al-Julani's government has been open that they would not support a military attack over there. So I'm hoping that they're able to walk that tripwire into a peaceful resolution where Syria can be reunited, but also that the local peoples can retain some autonomy so that they don't get screwed over like they did historically, because they were abandoned and they were the ones who fought for their home. So I do think they have deserved some amount of regional autonomy, whether it looks like Kurdistan in Iraq or it's something more mild. I do think they've earned something, and I think it's the best for peace, and everyone wants the fighting to stop, except apparently the Turks.
Dylan Burns, can I send you like a screenshot of questions if you?
Sure, if you want to.
All right.
Is it complicated or something?
It's like a lore of the logo, I think.
Oh, the lore of these logos.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I can tell you the general stuff in it, but when they said why is it pink, I have no all the. You probably have to ask somebody different, but I can tell you could you ask him if he knows the link of the pink color in Ukraine, Zaporizhia flag oblast on the right, and the standard of the Ukrainian chief of the general staff on the left. Okay, so I'll do my best here. So the symbol of Zaporizhia oblast on the right. Well, in the middle of that is a Cossack, and in Zaporizhia there's this island near the river that is where the hetman, where the Zaporizhian Cossacks were based in. It was very famous Cossack movement in Ukraine that many Ukrainians feel is very, very, very important to their national identity. And they see a lot of times these Cossacks as some of the first people who stood up for not only like Ukrainian, like this idea of what would develop into Ukrainian identity, Ukrainian independence movements, etc. It's why, for example, if you guys are boxing fans or you watched the fight Alexander Usyk had, he took Mazeppa's sword, one of these Cossacks, and his actual sword, the government gave it to him, and held it above him as he went to the ring to indicate like it as a symbol of Ukrainian resistance, because that's what these Cossacks have become. And the Cossacks basically were like almost like a mercenary army of people who, in large, many times they were forced off their land or otherwise, that had kind of banded together there and had made the hetmanate. So that's what that represents. As for the pink, I don't really know what the pink represents. And it says the standard of the Ukrainian chief of the general staff on the left. The trident is the Ukrainian trident, is very famous. The exact source of the trident is not really 100% known. What many people say is that it's supposed to represent a bird downward swooping into, like a swoop into the river to try to catch fish. So some people say it's like a falcon catching fish, and that's what the trident's supposed to represent. But you know, it's been used in this region for like a very, 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 very long time. As for everything else behind it, the swords, I believe, are supposed to represent the ground forces. The naval symbol, I believe, is supposed to represent the naval forces, and the wings are supposed to represent the Air Force. Yeah, and I don't see the end of the pink. I don't know how to describe, so I have no clue why they're pink. I think they're just fabulous.
Probably, yeah. I'm gonna screenshot. I'm gonna send you another screenshot of the question. So here.
Oh my God, what a this is a jeez Louise. What is?
Like, I was like, cause like when you first contacted me on the DMs, because like you're like, aren't you the guy who wanted to come on the stream earlier?
Well, yeah,
like,
yeah. You didn't want to interview me, did you?
Yeah. Yeah, because like I was going around to like other people asking like, hey, I need like a question, like a Q&A or something, because like me, I'm not an interviewer, I'm just like a normie, I'm just like a random chatter, you know. But
yeah. How many more questions do we have, by the way?
I think it's this, I think, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Number one, name a favorite oligarch in Ukraine and Russia, and if he doesn't know about one of either side, you can show him this. Proud to be a Russian oligarch, billionaire, Mikhail Borkharov. I mean, I don't know who my favorite oligarch would be. Maybe the former owner of the Kiev Post, because he, by pissing off the membership, created the Kiev Independent, which I think is one of the better publications in Ukraine. It is now the largest English-speaking publication. Thank God they were created right before the invasion. If it wasn't for them, a lot of people would have been even more misinformed about the war. So I think he would be, by accident, because of the type of censorship he wanted of the agricultural trade and its coverage, because, you know, oligarch have business interests, he downstream ended up creating a much better media organization than the Kiev Post really ever was. So I guess he would be my favorite on the Ukrainian side. For the Russian side, oh gosh, a favorite oligarch on the Russian side.
Burns is a
I don't know.
immoral,
I can't think of one.
corrupt,
I mean, I
bankrupt
think
man.
Mikhail Prokhorov is a good choice, though. I think he made a good choice for Mikhail. Number two, question two. Given that Ukraine has both a real and imagined, perceived, exaggerated history of disability claims post-Chernobyl, how do you feel about the strike that penetrated the outer sarcophagus? I would also mention that the plant was held up and the workers held hostage for a time as well. Hey, Gizmodes, thank you so much for the primer and being stuff for 3 months. I appreciate it. So, I on one hand don't want to fearmonger about atomic threats, you know, and nuclear threats, but on the other hand, we can't like downplay that bombing the Chernobyl sarcophagus is a bad thing. That's not good. That it's, you know, it's the odds of it leading, definitely considering the what bombed the sarcophagus, for those of you who don't know, was a Russian drone en route to Kiev. I saw a lot of people speculating maybe it was the Ukrainians. I have watched. I'll just put this out there. I spent a lot of times in the villages in that area. I see the drones pass by them over the houses there all the time. I've been playing games. I hear the drone. I hit the deck. I wait till it passes by, get backed up, and I keep playing Bannerlord, right? So I know they go that route. So it's very easy for me to believe because I've seen them go that route a million times over, and you can even track them. It's very easy to see that. But it was a small warhead, so the idea of it destroying the sarcophagus, like that itself as a big threat, no. But you don't want to play with fire. And if it's something that's not such a small warhead, maybe next time there will be an accident. And right now Ukraine doesn't really have the resources to clean up a nuclear catastrophe because all of its resources, like 60 to 70% of the government budget's going towards fighting off the largest country on the planet. So I'm concerned. The stuff that really made me know that people didn't care or that there was a certain amount of carelessness that people were willing to treat these very vital states was when I was across the river from the ZNPP, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, largest power plant in all of Europe, largest nuclear power plant in all of Europe, right? So if it's the largest one in Europe, you'd imagine pretty serious, pretty important to not blow it up. And I was there during the start of the Kherson counteroffensive in the Mykolaiv area. And within 48 hours of the start of the offensive, I was looking across the river, watching missiles being fired, and artillery being fired from right behind it, right near it. I was watching stuff being fired, going back and forth, back and forth. It scared me. It scared me watching that across the river next to the largest nuclear power plant. Because as much as they have made these power plants more sturdy, the RMB reactor cores are a thing of the past that caused the Chernobyl catastrophe. If you blow up a nuclear power plant enough, it'll be a problem. I don't need to be a scientist to know that. As for the last one, have you met anyone in your Ukraine travels who've been able to reunite with their children? Yeah, but if you mean kidnapped children, I haven't covered that story, but I know some people who are covering that story, and there's plenty of stuff publicizing it online, and I hope you can get your information from them. But I've been with them as they're working on the stories, and the way that the Russians talk these children, they talk to them as if their family doesn't want them anymore. They basically, well, your mom doesn't want you. That's why you're here. What do you mean? And their family just can't get in contact with them. The little details like that is the stuff that leaves me sick.
And my number 4 question is if you have any advice for people who wants to get into your type of work of journalism, what advice do you have?
Be a jihadist for the truth. Be a jihadist for documenting what is in front of you and making sure that that gets out to people, because none of this matters if nobody pays attention to it. If you have a first draft project, a first draft of history, and nobody reads it, then or nobody, it doesn't lead to anything, or people don't take advantage of having access to the truth, then it doesn't matter. So I would say you need to be radical about it. You need to be dedicated to it. Absolutely. That your job out here is to document a historical event of monumental proportion, and not only make sure you document it to the best of your ability and catch the perspectives of people while it's happening, before these thoughts are forgotten, before the seed has passed, but also making sure that you try your best to deliver it to people. Now that is the problem of distributors, the people who own the media organizations. But for the people who are on the ground, don't pull punches on the truth. Deliver it totally and completely, and you can't be wrong.
And then that's pretty much it. Dylan Burns. Could I set out my clip channel if you want?
Sure, why not?
All right, so the clip channel is called Loner Unbox. I'm just a clip channel for
Loner
Unbox. I think yeah, I think Dylan Burns. So yeah, I want to shout out Jesse. He's a German guy. We're joking about because he's German. We're joking about the Kurtz recursion into Kurtz and stuff like that. So yeah, we're just joking about words and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much it, Dylan. Stay safe. Sorry about what happened to your house and stuff like that. I hope you get enough funding and like for your house.
Thank
And,
you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. You have a good one, man.
Yep.
You know, that was short and sweet, but man, I was thrown off by name my favorite oligarch. I had never thought about that before. Name your favorite oligarch. That's a good question. That's a good fucking question. This is the first one that tripped me up.